Hey everyone, this is Nick with Whole Latte Love. I'm here with Brian. Happy to be back with you. Today, comparing some really cool machines. Now, before we get into that, I just want to point out to our guys behind the camera. We got Mark and Ben, who are going to be fielding your questions to us today. So hopefully you don't take it too easy on us, because I'm looking to have some rigorous espresso discussion. But these are some machines that I'm very familiar with, very cool, very good value. We've got the Bezzera BZ13. This is the DE model in particular. And then we've also got Profitec Pro 300, which is, I would say, really one of the more unique dual boiler espresso machines that exists on the market. So we're going to go over how each of these machines works, but before we say too much, we're going to actually brew some shots and froth some milk. So
let's do it.
Brian, I think we got to share grinders today, so maybe I'll start with the BZ13, and then we'll have you take it over with the Pro 300 here. So
the reason we paired these two together is because they have somewhat of a similar aesthetic, and so it's not uncommon that people ask us, what's the difference between these two machines? One of the biggest differences, obviously, is that the Bezzera is a heat exchange machine, and the Pro 300 is a dual boiler machine, true dual boiler machine. Yeah.
You'll obviously notice neither of these are E61 group espresso machines,
is correct.
But they are doing something a little different under the hood for each one. And again, that comes down to this being a heat exchanger and that being a dual boiler.
Truly.
And of course, we are using the Eureka Mignon Libra grinder. Big fan of this grinder here. Just do a little puck prep.
Grind by weight.
Now, if you are watching our video, this is one of our WDT tools, but we're going to have a much nicer one from Vitamin coming very soon that's going to match all of our available wood accents. So if you're watching in the future, take a look for that on our website. And if you're watching right now, keep your eyes peeled. So actually, we've got 18 grams. See, that's what I love about the Libra is, honestly, I don't have to really think about my dose at all. I think grind by weight is really helping to change the game as far as puck prep and kind of fastidiousness goes. Just with your preparation here. We do have our Akai Lunar, and so really let's go to the panel on the Bezzera for a moment. So we're going to press this button here on the right. This is our manual dispensing button. We can go over later though how we would actually program this machine. So I'm just going to push that. And so this version of the BZ13 as well, this is a Whole Latte Love exclusive. So we do have a white PID with a shot timer on it. Does come with a bottomless portafilter as well. So if you're looking for that, this machine's got that in the box along with the double spout. I know that's something, Mark did a poll on that, I think, on the YouTube channel maybe like a year, 2 years ago. And I think the general overwhelming consensus was that people think a bottomless is much more compelling. So
interesting.
Going to be a little over there, so we definitely want to grind a bit finer next time, but that's really it. We'll cover programming, but Brian, why don't you take it away just as far as brewing goes on our Pro 300.
And so an interesting thing is, because we only set up one grinder, this was intentional. To use the Libra, you have to actually get it so that it snugs up. So what we're going to have to do is adjust the cleat on it. I made a video about this grinder a little while ago. And
you are kind of our grinder guy.
Oh, come on. I really appreciate that, though.
Now, do you want this? Actually, no, we don't need this because you're going to tear it.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to release the cleat and just let it fall. Whoop, put that in there and then snug it up. And it's really, and then you tighten it back up. What you're going to want to do every time is give it a second to tear. Don't just go straight for it. You're going to get that FH.
I was going to say, if you've heard of that FH message, that basically FH abbreviation for filter holder. It means portafilter's not tearing, not set, so you are going to want to just reseat that.
It's all about like taking a second and letting the grinder figure out what it needs, and then it'll do it for you.
And the grinder too, it all comes down to snugness. Some of the experimenting that I've done with this thing, honestly, has been with using, say, for example, a dosing cup. So I believe it's the Akai medium dosing cup. I was able to actually fit it in that whole assembly, have it grind, right? So it just comes down to securing it. And so like you said, just a couple of twists on that cleat to loosen it up and then get yourself situated and then start grinding. So Brian, where is the brew switch on this machine?
So I'm so glad you asked, Nick. It is right up at the top here. These two switches down here, Nick kind of already covered it. No, you didn't cover it. We covered it before we went live. But one of them turns on the brew boiler and one of them turns on the steam boiler. But right here, where it says on and off, flip that to on and you're brewing.
Yes. So on is brew.
Yep, that is correct. And we do not have a brew gauge on this one. We have a steam pressure gauge.
And why is that, Brian?
You know, I'd like both, but you know, it's more important to have the monitor the steam pressure because we have the PID to monitor the brew temperature.
That's right. So one of the things that's unique about the Profitec Pro 300 is that the PID in here is actually used just to control the brew temperature. So the steam boiler is monitored by a pressure stat, and ultimately that's going to be a static pressure. You're not going to be able to change that unless you opened up the machine and then you made some changes to the pressure stat. So Mark, do we have any questions right now, or are we good to continue?
We sure do. We got a question here from Kay. They're wondering what the advantage of the dual boiler machine over the heat exchanger might be.
Brian, do you want to take that one?
That's a great question, Kay. And once again, I'll shout out to Kay. I think she's been here for every single one of our streams today. I really appreciate the fan. You know, I feel like we're building that community with these live streams, and I really appreciate that.
Absolutely.
So shout out to Kay for being there. Great question. Dual boiler versus heat exchanger. You're going to have, so you're going to have to adjust that again.
Right.
So for you know, a heat exchanger, the way that works is it's just one big boiler. And in the middle of it, there's a tube that heats the brew water. So the heat exchanger heats up the hot water that would come out of the hot water and the steam. And you have better temperature control over your brew water when you have a dual boiler machine, because you have a dedicated boiler that just fills with that hot water that's going to go right out into your espresso. And so I would say that one of the key differences is just heat stability. You know, we can go over it real quick, but the most Bezzera machines, even the heat exchangers, do the math for you.
Right.
So even though all you're doing is setting the temperature of the heat exchanger, which is the steam boiler, it does the math for you and figures out what your brew temperature water is going to be. So like, it's kind of nice versus, you know, something like a dual boiler but in this you're actually truly setting the temperature of the water in that brew boiler.
So that means the temperature in the boiler is not actually 201 degrees. It's much hotter, obviously, so that we can produce steam.
Right. It has to be well above boiling to hit steam.
But obviously, to your point, we have direct control over that temperature with a boiler that's being monitored by a PID and heated specifically for brew water.
Right.
And then there's a second boiler in there if you want to steam. Whereas, again, you said it, there's one boiler in here. It's got a supply of water for brewing, but then all the rest of that water is turning into steam. So. Let's actually segue right into that, is steaming. So
that'd be great.
On the BZ13, this is a really nice machine if you like making milk drinks every single day. So Brian, if you want to hand me the milk, actually.
Yeah.
So one of the cool things is we're going to do two things at once now. First, I'll go over programming. And the reason for that is it's really cool when you want to brew and steam at the same time. So we have all our buttons that go across the front of the machine, if we're going to get closer to that.
Right.
This Bezzera button, that's our manual button.
That's
but
one we used before, right?
If we push and hold that button, and all our lights start to shine, that tells us that we've entered programming mode. Now, there's a flow meter inside the machine, and I'm going to be just a little snug under there, but we'll turn the scale on. I want to press and hold again. I was a little too slow there.
Right.
Going back in. Now, we're extracting. So what's going to happen is, if I push this third button again, it's going to save the amount of my extraction. And then if we were to pull another shot, it would pull that same shot again. Now, where that's really neat is if you want to brew and steam at the same time, when you're using a volumetric style machine like this one, that means that the machine will cut your shot for you automatically. And then you can focus on frothing your milk and you don't have to worry about the shot running over.
That's very true.
And that's part of the reason why this machine, we'd recommend it for like very light commercial use. It does have an NSF certification. So if it's like an ice cream shop or a small business where coffee's not going to be the main menu item, but you want to do that, this I think would keep up pretty nicely.
And while he's doing that, do we have any more questions? Not right now? Oh, maybe?
Yes, we do have a question from Missy. She's wondering how many drinks each of these machines can make back to back.
Well, that's a great question. Back to back to back to back. you're going to have a better experience, I think, with the 300, just because it is a dual boiler. It has that dedicated. Oh, let's watch Nick. Hold on, I'm entranced. That's nice. So I think that you'd be better off with any dual boiler, especially the 300, because for back to back, you want those dedicated steam boiler and brew boiler. Whereas this is just pulling water straight from the reservoir. Yeah, boy, good job taking that shot, Mark. But and so you're going to keep pulling water, and eventually, like, the water needs to sit in that heat exchanger for a little bit just to get hot. And so back to back, you're going to start noticing a slight drop in temperature on that. Whereas this one, it's going to keep that brew temperature nice and steady, I would say. What do you think?
I mean, I think there's going to be one caveat to that, and that's going to be, it depends really on how particular you are too. Because let's say you've bought a really high quality single origin coffee and you want a specific brew temperature. Mm-hmm. You're not going to be rushing if those shots are a little bit spendier because you're brewing with something nicer. Right. And what's great about the 300 is that you're actually seeing the temperature inside the boiler. And you can guarantee that you're extracting at the correct temperature. On the BZ13, this machine, in terms of being able to do back-to-back drinks, is going to perform very well. But in terms of the accuracy, I would say that something like the 300, yes, that would definitely be my choice. So we wanted to talk, like I said, a little bit about how these machines are different. Well, up in here is a cartridge heater that's heating our group. And so that's actually incredibly efficient, which is why this machine can be ready to brew and to steam in just 10 minutes. Because we're not using a thermosiphon, we're not taking the heat and the energy from the water in the boiler to actually heat the group. We're using an electric heating element. Now, I would still recommend flushing some water through the portafilter to make sure that your first shots are consistent and hot, but that's going to be one of the advantages, I'd say, to something like the BZ13, just due to the design. Now, right. On the Pro 300, on the other hand, if you just switch the brew boiler on, which you can do, as Brian was mentioning, those right. switches down there, those control which boilers you want to use. Right. If we want to just show those off again before right. we put our portafilter in.
So yeah, this will be the brew, and then this will be the steam.
So you could use this machine just to steam if you wanted, just
yeah.
as a little piece of trivia there. But that would be ready in about 6 minutes. And
if
right
you're just
there,
doing brewing,
if you're
right.
just doing espresso, Pro 300 is great because a little bit of trivia, it's the same boiler in the Pro 300 actually as the Profitec Go and the ECM Casa 5, and it's the same group as well. So when you look at those parts diagrams, you'll notice, oh wait a minute, that's the same boiler. I've seen this before. At least if you're me and you look at parts diagrams, you notice those.
Oh, Nick. Everybody looks at parts diagrams, right? It's a lot of fun. It's great reading.
I mean, that's always kind of neat, I think, to see. And so,
we'll steam on this one too. I think if you wouldn't mind handing me the milk. Oh, I'm sorry, stepping right in front of the camera there.
Exchange.
Goodness me. Ah. But any more questions while we're setting up? I got too much milk. Hold on.
Oh, it doesn't seem like it, so we're good to go. Oh, did you pour that right back into the pitcher?
Okay.
Yeah. Well, it's not frothed yet, so no harm, no foul.
Oh, boy. So, let's see what I can do now that you've set the precedent.
I feel like I'm ready to be shown up.
No.
In the comments, you can vote now. No. Is Brian gonna win, or am I gonna maintain the crown here? Yeah, but that was good steam pressure right there,
for sure.
Obviously, as you can see. 2-hole steam tip as well.
So we're gonna try.
Liking the sounds of that already. Good roll there. A lot of people are curious about the Pro 300 and its steam pressure. You can see right here for yourself. So this is a machine, obviously. I think this version is a 2-hole tip. In the past,
yes.
Profitec did have 4-hole tips on this. I think 2-hole is probably the way to go. On a machine like this with a smaller steam boiler, when you want to get more duration from that pressure, it's better, I think, to have 2 holes just so you're not losing all of the steam right away. And I think the proof is going to be in the result here. So if you're all practicing at home, just keep an eye on Brian's latte here.
We'll see.
We'll see what's going on. I'm trying to watch too. I'm got my eye on the other camera.
Oh,
there.
I'm too thin. And I'm too shaky because I've had too much espresso today. Holy moly.
Here, we'll put them right side by side there.
Clearly Nick wins. Very good job. Yeah, so I could have used, not to get too heavy into latte art, but like I could have used to aerate the milk a little bit more, which is the kind of that tearing sound that we talk about at the beginning. So
Exactly.
it has nothing to do with the steam pressure of the machine. I was very pleased with the steam pressure that I got. It's more that it was a problem with steaming the milk on my performance.
And so one thing I will say too is, generally speaking, Bezzera's machines do tend, I think, to have really good steam pressure.
I agree.
Especially relative to the size of the boilers as well. So on this machine, I believe it's over a liter. This is a copper boiler though. Bezzera is generally a fan of copper. On our factory tour video, we have an interview with Luca Bezzera where he talks a little bit about that, wanting to use copper. In the Pro 300, we have brass for the brew boiler, and then we have steel, I think, for the steam boiler.
I think that's right, yeah. Yeah. Any more questions, Ben?
Yeah, do we have any questions from the audience?
We sure do. We got a question here from Joe K. Wants to know how many grams of ground espresso to ounces of espresso brewed is a good ratio?
That's gonna be a tough one.
We're mixing units there because with ounces of espresso out, that's not you typically want to weigh everything. Like weigh everything. Don't use volume as much as possible is what I would say. So a standard double like a espresso recipe is going to be a 1-to-2 ratio. So if you put 18 grams weighed grams of ground coffee into your portafilter, you want about 36 weighed grams of liquid espresso in your cup. And that's what I would say. You can play with that, obviously. If you go 18 and then 30, the shorter you go, it's going to become like it's going to, I'm sorry, they're making me laugh down here. The shorter you go, it's going to move into terms of like, if you've ever heard of a ristretto before. So if you're using more dose and then less coffee out, that's what you're going to do.
And just to comment on that a little bit, just with regards to using volume as a measurement, different espresso and different coffee, it's going to produce different amounts of crema ultimately, which will change the volume. So when you're looking at the volume of your shot, how much of that is crema? If you've got a very fresh coffee or a very heavily Robusta weighted blend, for example, you might get a lot more crema.
That's right.
But that's CO2 gas, and that's not necessarily indicative of the full extraction of 36 grams out, let's say, if you're going for a 1-to-2 ratio.
Right.
And then if you have a measured shot glass, right, going back to science class, so you're looking at the meniscus, right, of the water in the actual glass itself to know what's the surface of that. Yeah. So what I would say is, if you are converting from grams in, if you've got some way to weigh the coffee going in, but you don't have a means to weigh the brewed liquid coming out, the most important thing is going to be consistency. And so if there's, like on a measured shot glass like Brian just showed us, a point at which you can say, this is the same point at which I stopped my last shot.
That's right.
And you stop them all at the same time. You adjust your grind, or maybe your temperature, if you've got a machine like one of these with a PID. Make those changes, time the shots, and taste them, because ultimately you are looking for something that's palatable to you. And so if you can't follow an exact recipe that we've given you or that you've seen someplace else, it doesn't really matter what you've read on the internet if you don't like the way your coffee tastes. Right. And so I think that you really should be trying every shot that you brew, test all of your mistakes, all of your successes, and figure out kind of what is working.
Right.
That would be my best advice, especially if you don't have a scale.
Yeah, my mantra has always been taste everything always. If you don't understand the...
See, but that spells T. That's...
Yeah, that's why it's not a good acronym. It's not a good acronym, so that's what stinks.
Come up with a better one.
But nevertheless, like, if you don't drink your mistakes, then you won't know what the problem is. If you can taste your mistakes, then you'll say, when you pull a shot and it tastes like that again, you say, oh, this was too fast, or oh, this was too slow.
That's right.
But it doesn't matter as long as it tastes good to you. So, do we have another question, Ben?
We sure do. We got a question here from FLX Enthusiast. First of all, they love our channel, and they're wondering how you determine what brew temperature you should use.
It's a great question, actually.
I'm assuming we've got a local person there from the Finger Lakes, so that's fun too. Yeah, brew temperature is, once again, we kind of went over it. This is not actually the temperature in the boiler.
I'm going to get this just right out of the
Yeah,
way.
so that is going to be the approximate temperature of the brew water. And so for me personally, many differences of opinion here. This is once again kind of touching on what we just talked about. Whatever tastes best for you. But for me, I would never brew over 202. Somewhere between like 199 and 202 is going to be good for any coffee you throw through it, in my personal opinion. What do you think?
I do agree with that, and I think that really it is going to come down to the origin of the coffee as well as the roast.
Sure.
And one thing that I would say is, honestly, everything in espresso is exaggerated. So even a range of 3 degrees for your extraction can have a substantial difference on a particular coffee. So that's why things like grind fineness adjustment is done on a very micro level to make sure that you're not introducing huge changes. Because ultimately, you've got a pressurized environment with a pump forcing water through at very, very high pressure against a very, very fine puck that's resisting it.
It's all of the most volatile things that you could possibly imagine, liquids, powders, all combined into one thing, and it's a incredible environment. Typically, there's schools of thought that say the darker the roast, the higher the temperature that you brew. I think is right, or is it lower?
It's lower. With
it's lower. It is lower. Dang it.
Yeah. So the higher temperature helps to mitigate acidity in some cases with coffees, and when you couple that with things like low flow rates, like you were saying in your previous stream, setting the OPV to 8 bar, for example, that can add a new variable, let's say, to slow down the actual extraction to allow the water more time for a more even extraction. The lower temperatures, you're going to get less of like the bitterness or the carbonization that you would taste in a dark roast, where you are tasting more of that just higher temperature smokiness and burnt flavor, as opposed to the origin itself.
Right, that's a good one. How about it, Ben? Any more? No, we're good. No? We're good for now, or?
Nothing in the chat, but I had a question that
You know what, Ben? Ask away, please.
It's probably about my eyesight, because I'm the only one here who doesn't have glasses. I was wondering
how do you do it, Nick? No, I was wondering, when you were programming the Bezzera there, does it program its shots based on volume of water dispensed or on time spent extracting? Or a third thing that I didn't think of?
I was wondering what that third thing was myself, actually.
Right, there's a lot of different, there's different games you could play with that, but yeah, no, it does have a flow meter in there, so it is measuring the amount of water that is being pushed out.
It's based on volume, and that's why when you're programming, you may find that the next time you use it, the actual time displayed on the PID is different. And it's all based on the resistance at the group. So when you program, you really want to make sure, too, that you have your shot prepped the same way that you're going to be prepping it every single time. What you don't want to do is program it with nothing in there, because then when you put your portafilter in, you have no idea what's going to come out.
That's true. Unless you have like really dependable coffee, which you really don't. Like, it's going to be different every time. We say it all the time. It's not a set and forget sort of thing. You're going to want to dial in every single time.
Set and forget.
That is right.
Mark, did you ever come up with your acronym for that or no? I'm trying to recall, because I do remember that.
No, but that's a very valid question, Ben. There are other ones that kind of, it's sort of like grind by weight versus timed grinding. It's the difference between measuring what's coming out versus the time it takes to produce it.
Well, and that's right. So that's why I think grind by weight is such a substantial improvement on grinders in general, because
it's the future.
Whenever you change your grind, be it to more coarse or more fine, ultimately the output is going to change. A finer grind is going to take longer to produce the same amount of coffee as a coarser grind would. And so when you're using a grinder that dials in by time, generally speaking, I always say grind manually until you get the extractions that you want, and then figure out how much time it's going to take to actually produce that amount of coffee. Because really, what's happening is every time you make those changes, the time is changing. And so you really want to dial for taste. You can have a recipe, you can use a scale, you can follow ratio, but until you know that the coffee is where you want the grind setting to be, it's really not worth it to change the time every time. But say again on something like the Libra, where you're grinding by weight and you're calibrating, or it's tearing and then grinding to produce a set amount of coffee. Even as you change the grind, it's monitoring that amount, and then it's running the motor for however much time it needs. Like you'll see it, especially if it's trying to catch up at the end, just a little pulses.
Yep.
Just to get to that last bit of coffee.
Honestly, the combination of these two is like dynamite especially like you said, for a small cafe or like a ice cream shop. I love the idea of it being in an ice cream shop. For some reason, that just made me smile
Gelato,
so much inside.
If you're
Definitely. But yeah, so if you've got your weight set and you've got your volume set, I mean, you're really set. That would be so good. Like I love that pairing. Actually.
Yeah. So maybe let's come full circle then and just kind of close out. So right. If you've got your weight set, if you've got your volume set, the BZ13 is not going to be as precise as a directly regulated boiler on something like the Pro 300. So if you were really meticulous and you're buying really high-end single origin coffees and you want to guarantee that you've got accurate and stable temperatures, I would say the Pro 300 is the one that you want. Right. Now, if you want a machine that's going to be ready fast, if you drink milk drinks frequently, if you want to be able to push a button, walk away, get your toast out of the toaster, or you have guests or other family members who maybe not so easily trainable when it comes to the barista lifestyle, let's say, a machine like that is going to kind of reduce some of the complexity. If it stops on its own, if you just push a button, that's generally a lot less intimidating. And especially at a time like this, during the holidays when you've got guests, just say, hey, just put it in there, press the button. Okay, then put it in there, press the button. Right. And then grandma has her cappuccino and everyone's nice and caffeinated.
Right. Another quick difference, just looking at the machines, more of a preference sort of thing, I think. But, you might have seen Nick. You've got what I call them toggles.
Joysticks, that's
joysticks.
My term for it.
And then you've got knobs on this one. So
that's right.
I prefer I'll call them what you want me to, the joysticks.
That's a joy to use.
Oh, it sure is. No, but I prefer those. It's just sort of like you can kind of hit it with your elbow, whereas this, like, you really have to dedicate your hand to it.
I kind of want to just do a little bit of this.
What are you going to do? Yeah, look at that.
All right, it's proven. It works.
You can just sort of hit it with your elbow.
Seen it here on Whole Latte Love.
No, it's it's very nice. It's a small difference. Both of these can be outfitted with custom wood accents.
They can actually. So that's a great point. Just to close out, both of these machines do have wood accenting available.
Right.
We have a variety of woods. We have more even coming in. So obviously, keep your eyes peeled for things like that. Even a grinder like the Mignon, we have lids that will match, so you can match the wood accenting on your machine with your tamper, with your lid on your grinder as well. We are getting more accessories from them. One thing that we've got for some machines that we haven't quite expanded yet to, not featured here obviously, is the Espresso cover, which is a nice kind of faux leather cover that you can put on top to prevent scratching from cups. Right. We have the full assortment, I think, for Profitec, ECM, Rocket Espresso. Bezzera, I think, is probably going to be a phase 2 as far as that goes. But again, that is something that's nice about this is, on your E61, it looks pretty, but it just kind of hangs off. You could never put a cup on top of it, but you can put cups right up here.
And that's a hot cup warmer up there. It's one of the hottest ones we've tested. But I think it's time to start thinking about wrapping things up. I want to mention real quick, we'd love it if you'd subscribe to our channel. We've got lots of great content on there, and there'll be even more. We're doing these live streams, I think, through next week at least.
Live streams, and then what? Our coffee seminars too?
The coffee seminars as well. Phenomenal service. Check those out. Right now we're doing we've got some of them scheduled for tomorrow, actually. That's right. So yeah, but much like the coffee seminars, we also have CoffeeCast service, and maybe you could tell them about that a little bit.
Right, so just in the room next to our main studio, we have our CoffeeCast studio. You get paired up with a member of our coffee team, basically, one of our sales experts, myself included sometimes.
You just did one, actually, right before you came
I just came right in here, but that gives you the chance to choose a machine, choose equipment, a topic, and just will set right up in that studio with the exact same equipment that you have or that you'd like to take a look at, and you'll be guided through in a one-on-one video call. So that's a really great way. Oh yeah, for free. Pre and post sale, so if it's either you have read all the Reddit posts and you're like, I don't know what to do, or you've got it on your counter and you're like, oh my gosh, what am I getting myself into? Book the cast and we're happy to get you, brewing in no time.
Right. And also, we tried to cover a lot of information about these machines. But if you have any more questions that didn't get answered, check out our website. All the details for all 3 of these machines are there. readily available to compare and contrast the way we've got the compare function on the website that's absolutely phenomenal. I use it all the time actually at my desk. And also, in the description of this video, we should have some great videos about all of these products that'll kind of fill you in on any questions that we didn't cover in this half hour. But other than that, I think we're all done here. I want to say thanks, Nick. You kind of opened it, but I'm going to close.
I was going to say you're stealing my outro from me.
Thanks, Nick, for joining me out here. It's so much fun to be out here. So we're going to say, thanks for joining us, and stay tuned for even more of the best on Everything Coffee, brought to you by Whole Latte Love.